Today on the agenda, we're going to actually be doing some refactoring of code so that you can understand how to write your code in a way that you do not need to include comments. My name is Kenny, and this is Tech Talk with RHT Services, where I talk about software development, web development, and a whole other things related to tech. Now, where did this initiative or background of this video come from? Well, in the Black Cloud Geeks Facebook group, a person made a post and he was going through the application code at wherever he works at. And as he was going through it, he was adding comments to the things that were being done in the code. Then he went and made a post in the group that said, more so to the more experienced developers, that they should be putting comments in their code so that the less experienced developers can understand what is being done in the code. I commented on that post and said, no, that is a bad practice. I cited Clean Code by Robert Martin and how when you do that, you increase the risk of technical debt in your code because of the fact portions of the code can be refactored without the comment being refactored along with that code. And as a result, the comment is now out of sync with what the code is doing or what the code is conveying. And for that reason, when somebody goes through there and they only look at the comment, they were like, oh, this comment says the code does this, when in fact, that may not be the case any longer. And so a number of people were like, no, you don't know, you don't agree. It's like you're talking sideways or whatever. And I was like, okay, whatever. I'm not going to win. I know I'm not going to win the argument with that group of people. However, I will say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make a video where I explain and show how you can refactor your code so that you do not need to use comments. And that's what this video is about. What I have here is something I'm in the process of building, and it is an online store for the RHT Services website. Now, when you see this, that portion of the website may be up and running, but I'm not fully sure when I'll actually have it running, but it's in development at this point. Now, what I did was to actually build out this PHP script, and I started with using commented code, and I more so wrote it out like pseudocode. So connect to the database. Once we've established a connection to the database, we need to check to see if a order event already exists. If it does not exist, then if it does exist, we need to exit out of this script because there's nothing else that we need to do. If it does not exist, and actually there should be another comment that I had here, we should insert the event into the database. All right, and that's how this script would work. And so I know you're thinking, well, this doesn't look like what it says. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's true. All right, so how can this code be refactored so that it does not need to have comments like this one here? All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna leave the original code that's in here commented out. I know it may be a little bit difficult to see, but you'll see what I want you to be able to see what I'm starting with versus what we actually end up with. So what I'm going to do is copy this here, and I'm going to hit Control/ to comment that out. And then I'm going to do DB connection is equal to connect to database, or let's say get DB connection. All right, and that's a method. So I'm going to come up here above my try catch, and I have a separator here just to separate my individual methods from my actual logic or main in this, if you will. And because after all, this is a PHP script, it's not an actual application. So I'm going to create a function called getDBConnection that does not take any values in. And I want to paste that there. And then I also want to return DB connection. Now, the way this is set up is if a DB connection cannot be established, it will throw an exception based upon this line right here. Thus, I do not need to write logic to actually check to see if an exception or database connection issue will occur. This handles that exception being thrown. And so already we see that these two lines here are now clarified by this line here, which is to get a database connection. I'm not sure why it is. Let's see what this unreachable code is detected. All right, so I got some stuff here that I'm actually not going to use in the final implementation, so I'm going ahead and remove that. All right, so now we have our DB connection is getting set from the method get DB connection. All right, next we need to check and see if an event already exists. So again, I'm going to highlight this, going to comment it out, and then we're going to say order. We're going to call it event exists, and I'm going to say does event ID already exist? And from that, we're going to need a DB connection. We're also going to need the event ID. And we'll come back up to the top again. We'll do a function. Does event ID already exist? And we'll accept a DB connection. And I know event ID is a string, so I'm going to specify that there. In this method, I know we'll return a Boolean, so I'm going to set that return type there. This one returns a MySQL object, and I probably should set that there. I think that'll work correctly. Yes, there we go. All right, so I'm taking my code that I've gotten from down below, and I'm gonna put it up here. And then with this event ID, I'm actually going to replace this value here with that there, and we have the same thing. And then we need to return, which is the next portion of this. So we're checking to see if the event ID does exist, but we want to check that down there. So I want to put this here, and what this will do, it'll do the same evaluation, but it will return it back as a Boolean value. All right, so now that we have whether the event exists, I'm going to comment that out, and then we're going to do event exists. And so if that is true, then it will enter inside of this if condition, to which then it will, the exception will be thrown. Next, we're going to copy this here, comment it out first, and then we have a method. We'll say insert event or save event or something else of that nature. However you want to phrase this is how you can name this particular method. So we need to give this insert event a DB connection in addition to the order, and we also need to give it an IP address because the IP address is being acquired up here at the top and being set to a variable. As you see, I have a to-do in there right now, so it's not finalized at this time, but when I do, it'll actually check that IP address as well and save it with the other details. Oh, and I'm also missing a brace right here. Take that out. All right. So now we have our insert event method. So we need to create it, function, insert event with our DB connection, our order object, and a IP address. All right, and this value here, excuse me, this method it doesn't return anything, so we're going to set it to be void. I'm going to format the document really quickly, and I'm going to comment that there and place, nope, don't do that. Place this here. Now I'm gonna come back in a different video or future before I actually commit this and change this out so that this variable is not being done like this twice. All right, so now we have the insert event and everything is there. Now, if you come through this and you will see, all right, you have our method names that says, all right, we're getting the DB connection and we're setting it to DB connection. And then we're checking to see, does this event already exist? And you give it what it needs, the database connection, as well as an event ID to check for. If that event exists, then whether it's true or false, is put into this variable, to which then that value is then used here to throw the exception. Now, it is possible to put this inside of this does event ID already exist method, but I'm going to leave it out separate because the thing about this is if I were to combine that in there, that then changes the nature of that particular method. And one thing that Uncle Bob describes in his book is if your method is confusing or your method has too many responsibilities, then that method should be left separate or broken down into smaller pieces. And thus, by having it thrown an exception in that particular case, can be rather misleading. Thus why I'm leaving this condition here and just doing the getting of that event ID, or at least selecting that event ID from the database in this method only. And then when we come down here, we're inserting the event to the database, which is this line right here. And so now we take all of this out and And now our code still conveys that we're connecting to the database, checking to see if the event ID already exists, throwing an exception if it does exist, and if it doesn't, we continue past that condition and insert the event into the database. And this is how you get around not putting comments in your code, because of the fact if I change the way this method works. So let's say this is, I want to change this to, instead of get DB connection, get MySQL connection. All right. And so now I still have that association because I'm calling the method to specify what is being done. What is this doing? It's getting the MySQL connection and returning it back to the DB connection variable. If I were to put a comment there that says get Sybase, or yeah, let's say get Sybase, SYBASE connection. Well, and then I were to change this to, whoops, get Oracle connection. Now my comment is out of sync with my code because of the fact when you go to refactor methods and variable names, the comments associated with that do not get updated. And this right here is confusing. In addition to, it creates technical debt. That being said, this is how I, in my opinion, would suggest people do this so that they're not putting comments in their code. You just group a set or multiple sets of functionality into its own method, and then you use that method and call whatever or pass in whatever it needs to complete that particular action, and continue to do that through the rest of that particular class, method, or whatever else that it is doing. That being said, hopefully you have learned something in this video. If you're writing comments in your code, I please suggest that you stop doing that and consider writing functions that group the particular actions that those comments represent, so that it is more easy to maintain. In addition to, if the code were to be refactored, the comments do not become out of sync with what the code is actually doing. If you have any comments or questions about this video, feel free to drop them down below. Also, please give me a thumbs up if you've learned something new from this video. And also, last but not least, please be sure to subscribe. New videos come out all the time. Please be sure to stay tuned, and we'll see you in the next video.